Hey guys, and welcome to episode 6 of our How to Make a Moba in Unity tutorial series. Today we're going to continue doing UI elements. In the last episode we were doing the minimap, and in this episode what we're going to do is add a inventory system to this game. So I just focused in here on the canvas, and I can zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to start to add some elements that we'll need. So first we need a UI panel, and I'll just call this inventory UI. And then I'm going to make another panel child to this, so UI panel, and I'm just going to set both of these as anchored and positioned in the bottom right. So I'll do the same here. And we're just going to stretch this down, and we can even remove the image from the parent object. So we just have this child object here, and I'm going to go to the color and make sure there's no alpha there either. And I'm just going to roughly put it where I think's best, and I can probably position it up slightly as well. Something like that. And that looks good. So here we have some placeholder sprites that I'm going to be using today. I'll make sure to upload them and put them in the description of the video. So we'll just use this here to set up our background. Now, it's important when doing UI elements because depending on someone's screen resolution, they can stretch and they can change size. That rather than just using any sprite settings, what we'll need to do is go to the sprite editor, and actually make sure we slice it. And here you can see what I've done is I've gone around the border and I've just done 20 on each border. So if I just put that to 0, you can see this is just sliced down to 20. And by having it sliced, what that means is when we then go back to this panel here, we have it as image type slice, which means no matter how much we stretch it, the borders aren't going to be warped. If I just put this back to simple for a second, you'll see, for example, here we have much smaller borders and they do get blurry and stretch out a bit, like if I do that. So if I just bring it back to the size I want, and then I go back to sliced, that's the best way to sort of do UI elements that may scale up and down in size. Now the next thing we'll want to do is add another panel to this. And this is going to be our inventory slot. Now here I'm just going to do the same as before. I've just got a slightly different color. It's not showing up great now, but when we click play it will show up. And I'm just going to anchor this to the top left, and I'm just going to set the height maybe as 70 and the width as 70, and move it along maybe to like 50 and -50. Also, I need to make sure the alpha is set to max, and then we've got a small slot here. And again, I've done the same thing. I've gone into the sprite editor, sliced it a reasonable amount around the edges, and then made sure that it's sliced in the image type. Then from there, if we go back to our parent panel, we can add a component, and we'll just want to add a grid component, a grid layout group. And then what we can do is take the inventory slot, turn it into a prefab, and let's just duplicate it a bunch of times. And because its parent's a grid, it's going to lay these UI elements out in a grid. And then from the grid, we can kind of control the size of this. So we could say 50 by 50. This looks a little small, so maybe 80 by 80. And then we can increase spacing, Y spacing even. And then we can put some padding in as well on the left. No, 0 in the right, but some from the top. And then roughly speaking, we're going to have, you know, a small grid laid out of slots here. Let's say 30 there, and I think I'm just going to say 15 there. So that's looking okay. And in our inventory slot prefab, we'll just want to go in and we'll want to add a image. So a UI image. And this image we can just disable for now, but this is something we're going to want to update later on as and when items are in those inventory slots. We just save the prefab and come out of it. And if we just click play to just see how this will look in game. So here you have it, very simple UI element right there where the inventory is. So now what we'll do is we'll set up the scripts to allow us to start adding items into this. So the first script we'll want to create is just a scriptable object script. We'll just call this, let's see, item. And if we just open that up, so there we have it, our item script. Okay, so in this item script, what we'll want to do is remove the top two libraries and then go down here into the class, and instead of being a mono behavior, we want it to be a scriptable object. And then we'll also delete the start and update functions. And the first thing we'll want to do is put in a string, and this string will be the item name. And we'll just call it by default new item. And the other variable we want is a public sprite, and we'll call this icon, and by default it can just be a null sprite. Now what's great about setting up a scriptable object like this is basically every item we create in our game, we can just add various stats to this list of variables, and then any item we create will exist as an object in our asset folder. It's a great way of storing data rather than having it in multiple scripts. You can have it in a file-based system basically. So if we go, the other thing we'll want to do here is create an asset menu. So if we just go up here and create asset menu, and we'll say file name is equal to new item. And we'll say menu name is equal to inventory / item. And then if we save that and go back into the engine, what you'll be able to see is if we click create, go to inventory, we now have the option to create a item. So if we just do this, and I can create an item, let's say boots. I'll use the sprite that I made earlier, and it's just a placeholder. And now we've already got a item created for our game, and we'll just rename this and just call it boots. And what we want to do essentially is be able to assign this item or an instance of this item into our UI. So the next thing we'll need to do is create an inventory manager. C# script, inventory manager, and let's just load up that script. Okay, so in our inventory manager, the first thing we'll want to do is make this into a singleton. So how we're going to do that is we're just going to say public static and then inventory manager, and then we'll just say instance. Oh, I misspelled instance there, so just put an N. And then what we'll do is a awake function. So private void awake, and then if instance is not equal to null, then we want to do a debug.log and basically say that there is more than one instance of inventory manager. Now the reason why we need to do this is essentially whenever you set up a singleton, what you're doing is saying you're creating a public single reference to a script. So that way any script should be able to access this. So when setting up a singleton, we need to make sure there is only ever one instance of it. That's why we're putting this if statement in. If there is more than one instance, we'll just return. But then if not, we can just say instance is equal to this. And this code is pretty standard. And essentially, this is how you would turn a script like this into a singleton. And I'm just going to put a comment here. Just so I know, when first glancing at this, I'll know that this is set up as a singleton. Next, what we'll want to do is set up a public integer, and this can just be our inventory space. And so far we've got 8 slots, so I'll just set it to 8. We'll also want a public list, and we'll set this up as a list of items. And we'll call the list items, and then we'll just say it's equal to new list, and then it's just item, and we'll create a public void function and call it add, and we'll just take in the argument of item. And then what we'll do here is say if items dot count is greater than or equal to inventory space. And essentially what this if statement is taking our inventory space, seeing how many items are in our inventory list, and just making sure that the count hasn't exceeded the inventory space. And then what we can do if it has, we say debug.log, and we can just say inventory is full, and then we can just say return for that, items dot add, and then we'll say item. And what that's simply doing is adding the item that we've put into this argument here into the items list, and then we can also return that. What we can do here is we can set up a delegate, and we'll use this delegate basically to invoke an event, and that way we will only update our UI elements whenever a new item is added to our list. So we can just say public delegate void, and we'll call this on item changed, and then we'll also say public on item changed. We'll say on item changed callback, and then what we'll do is go back to the add function, and we'll just say something as simple as, maybe something like if on item change callback does not equal null, then we can say on item change callback invoke. And basically what this will do for us is it will invoke a function that we assign to this in another script whenever this event happens, essentially. Or whenever this is invoked, it will call that function for us. And that'll be a part of another script we'll use to manage the AI that I'll show you in a second. The next function we can add is the remove function. So public void remove, and then we'll just say item, and this is very similar to the add function. So all we'll need to do is say items.remove, and then we'll remove the current item that's being told to remove. And we'll just put the same code as here, which is the event we're going to invoke whenever an item is added or removed in this case. So that's our inventory manager done. The next thing we'll need to do is set up a script to manage our inventory slots and then a final script to communicate between the manager and the individual slots. So if we go back into the engine, so back in the engine, what we'll need to do is create another script, and this script is simply just going to be our inventory slot script. And what we want to do is go into the inventory slot prefab and just put that script on there. And if we open that up, and here we need to make sure that we're using Unity engine .ui, and then we can delete all these functions here. And we can just say we need a public image, and we'll call this icon. And we also want to have an item, and we'll just call this item as well. And then we just need two functions, one to add an item to the UI or the inventory slot, and one to remove an item. So we can just say item, and we'll call it new item. And we'll just say item is equal to new item, icon.sprite is equal to item.icon, and icon.enabled equals true. So essentially what this code is doing is, and I need a semicolon there. So basically what this function is doing is essentially allowing us to change the sprite and the icon assigned to the inventory slot based on the item we choose to add onto it. And we just need another function to clear the slot. So we'll say public void clear slot. And we'll say item equals null, icon.sprite is equal to null, and the icon.enabled is equal to false. So we'll use the inventory manager to add items to our list of items. We'll then use that list in the inventory UI manager to communicate to the slots whether or not they have an item in them. So if we go back into the engine and we just look at this script, so you'll see there's no icon assigned, and basically the icon is this image here, and we can even rename this game object to icon, and we just want to make sure as default it's disabled so we don't see like a white box there. And I just want to make sure that it's a good size as well. So let's say 80 by 80. Still seems to be covering it. Let's say 60 by 60 seems decent. But then we'll disable that image, save it, and then go back. So we've pretty much got most of the pieces in place. The last thing we need to do is create our inventory UI script. So create a C# script, and it's inventory UI script, and we'll just open this up. Okay, so in the UI script, we will just need a reference to the game object that is the parent to all the inventory slots. So we'll just take a public transform and call it inventory parent, let's say, and then we need to take an inventory manager, call it inventory, our inventory slot script, and then we'll just call this slots. And then I just need an awake function and say, I'll say the inventory is equal to the inventory manager.instance. And because we set it up as a singleton, we can just reference it here. And then we also need to say slots is equal to inventory parent.getComponent in children. So we need the plural and we need in children. and we want to get all the inventory slot scripts assigned to this list from all the children of the inventory parent. And then we also want another function, and we'll call this update UI. Let's say update UI. So what we'll want in this function is a for loop. So we'll say for, and then we'll take the int I and say it's equal to 0. And we'll say as long as I is less than the slots dot length, and then we'll say I, and then we'll add 1 to it. And then from here, we just need to say if I is less than the inventory dot items, so this is the list of items we have, and its count, then what we can do is we can say slots I dot add item, and then inventory dot items, and then we'll just say I. So if you don't understand what this is doing, is essentially we've taken all the inventory slot scripts and we've put them into a list, and then in that list we're going through our items list, so from our inventory manager, this items list that we've set up, where is it? Here it is, and we're just adding every item's icon image to each inventory slot so it fills out for it. So then what we also want to do is say, if there is no more items in the list, then that means the rest of them need to be clear. So we'll just clear those slots. So we'll say slots I, and then dot clear slot. And so yeah, as it goes through this, if there's no more items in the list, it can simply just clear the slots in the inventory. So now to run this function, what we can do is we can use the event that we set up here. And when we've invoked it, we can then use that to basically run this update UI function. And to get this to happen, all we need to do is go to inventory and dot on item change callback, and we just put plus equals update UI. And basically what that'll do is every time this is invoked on our inventory manager, it'll run the update UI. So therefore it's not updating the UI every single frame of the game. It's only calling this as and when items are added to and from our inventory. Okay, now that's all set up, we can go back into Unity and just assign everything and make sure everything's set up. So the UI script will just assign to our main canvas. And then here we need to put the inventory parent. So this is the game object that has all our inventory slots beneath it. So it's just this panel here. The other thing we'll need to assign is our inventory manager. I'll just put this on the game manager. And there you can see we have an inventory space of 8 that we set up and a list of all our items. Then from there, everything's good to go. We just need to add items to our list. So what I'll do is I'll just add a game object. So what we can do here is we can just add a new game object to the scene, and we're just going to call this shop. And I'm just going to move this ever so slightly, and we can just add a component. In fact, I'll create a script here. We'll call this shop script. Open up the shop script. And what I'll do is just on the start function, I'll do something very basic like inventory manager.instance.add, and then we'll just add an item. And we just need a variable for that item. So we'll just say public item, call it item again. And basically what we can do here is just test the system that we've built out. So what we need to do is assign our shop script here, and then we need to re-import, I think, because it's not showing the public variable. And there we go. And then we just need to use this boots item we made earlier, and we can just assign that. So we just put the boots in here. And so the shop script's just going to, in fact, I'll show the scripts. So if we look at this, we'll go, the shop script has the item, which is the boots. That's going to be added to the inventory manager. The inventory manager is then going to add that to its items list. And then it's going to invoke a callback. And that callback's then going to go here and use the update function, update UI function, to add the icon. It's going to go through all the inventory slots, and it's going to tell the inventory slot what item is inside of it. And then if we go into the inventory slots, when the inventory slot is told what item's inside of it, it's going to update the icon. So if we go back into Engine, hopefully that's all working. So if we just click play, okay, and we seem to have an error there. The game manager does have the boots item, which is good. But this inventory slot isn't showing a item. So we just need to check what's going on there. Okay, I found the source of the error we were getting there. It's just simply here. I need to make sure the item is being added before we invoke this. So if we go then back into Unity and we just click play, very simply there, we've got the boot in the UI. And it just to show that this scales and this works properly, if we go back into the shop script, and if we just to test this, we'll just say, copy and paste it a few times, save that. Then very easily the items filled up various UI slots. So in this episode, we've covered the basics of setting up an inventory, managing that list, managing the UI elements. What I'll hopefully be doing in the next episode is having those items actually affect stats of the players. For example, the boots could affect the player's speed, or we could have armor items that affect the player's health and change the variables and have those scripts interact with one another. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.